exhausting. I'll look more or less the same. Welcome to my office, by the way. I think I've had 7 UFO experiences here, all at my Tai Chi class. So this is the place where I was. I was over there by the flagpole. And a jet flew over. I looked up. Well, I said, airliner going to LaGuardia. Out of the corner of my eye, over there, down 89th Street, I saw my peripheral vision picked up something moving, and it emerged from behind the tree, a giant tree like this one on the other side. And it came into the middle of the street, a giant gray sphere along the side of that building, and it cleared that building by 100 feet or 150 feet. And then by that time I had told my girlfriend, hey, take a look at this, it's a UFO. And my mind was boggled, I was saying, lead balloon? Because that's...
What did it look like?
It looked like a lead balloon.
A lead balloon?
I mean, that paradox. It was about...
Circular?
Sphere.
A sphere like a perfect circle?
A perfect sphere.
Silver?
Ball. Silver.
Metallic? Or?
It looked gunmetal gray.
When was this?
June 1st, 2019 at 4 p.m.
June 1st, so a year ago, or
2 years ago.
2 years ago in June.
Mm-hmm. And the weather was just like this. It was perfectly clear. So it gets above that building about 100 feet, and that's when something really amazing happened. It started to roll, and I thought it started to glimmer. There was a radiance around it. It started to roll, and I expected to see the ball rolling like a ball. But when it rolled, it turned into a disc. It went from, let's say this is a ball, it rolled slowly like this and turned into a disc. And then it started to move horizontally around that curve of the building, and it was doing this, oscillating back and forth very gently, waving the wings like that. And then it made the turn around the monument. I was walking, I jumped on top of the monument so I could see it, moved around the monument, then flew off directly toward Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. And I'm sure that they have a videotape of it. It was really a close encounter.
What were you doing when it happened?
Oh, I was sitting there waiting for a class to congregate.
For
I teach
Tai Chi?
Tai Chi. Yeah, I teach Tai Chi.
You know what I've been thinking is that we're not a singular consciousness, that we're connected to a stream.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you tap into the heart stream, then you tap into another field of energy. So I was thinking that your Tai Chi, that you're doing this, tapping into an ultimate stream, and so you're in sync with these higher energies.
Well, I've got something special for your audience. I'm going to tell you today that I discovered the origins of Tai Chi in a Chinese poem dating back to the Tang Dynasty. Traditionally, the earliest written record of Tai Chi was considered 1100 AD, the Sung Dynasty. But in 1978, I discovered a poem written in the Tang Dynasty around 750 AD in the city of Xi'an, capital city of China. And it is an official historical account of the Tang Dynasty records that was demanded by the Emperor Xuanzong. And he claimed that he was walking the ramparts of the palace in Xi'an. Xi'an is where they found the terracotta army of 10,000 soldiers and the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Qin is the reason we call it China, the Emperor Qin Shi Huang.
I heard that those soldiers were put there to be an interdimensional army.
To guard him, to guard his rest, to guard his peace and his soul, yes, into eternity. So I was there in 1986. It was a marvelous experience. So and the reason I went was this poem that I discovered and translated. When I translated it, I discovered that it was a code. It had hidden references to Tai Chi people and Tai Chi postures And as it turned out, when I investigated the characters, the emperor claimed that he was walking on the ramparts of the palace at Xi'an one evening, and that a moon ship came down and landed on the ramparts of the castle, and that the moon people came out and invited him to go to the moon, to go to heaven. Peng Lai Shan is fairyland in Chinese. Peng Lai Shan is heaven, island in the sky, you might say. So he accepted, and the moon people took him to the moon, where he was entertained by fairies dancing this beautiful dance in resplendent rainbow-colored garments, and that he heard this celestial music, and they entertained him for the night. The next day they brought him back at dawn, and he said that as he was coming in at dawn, he could see the burned out campfires, the people awakening, the animals starting to go about bleating, sheep and cows and whatnot, and that they landed on the same place where they had taken him, and then he disembarked, and he was so excited that the first thing he did is he ran to got his wife and he said, "You have to learn this dance that I learned from the moon people. I want you to learn it before I forget it. And I'm going to write down the music that I heard." So that became a vogue. That was called rainbow dancing. The dance of the rainbow clothes and the feathered garments. So my intuition was correct. And Tai Chi did come from outer space. And it's been planted here by the moon people to help us perfect ourselves, perfect our balance, become more human. Not transhuman. I'm on a campaign against transhumanism. Why would you want to transcend your humanity when you haven't even arrived at it? You know?
Completely.
So I'm going to have a radio show this weekend with...
We're just beginning to sort of evolve.
Exactly. Well, just remembering. You know, Graham Hancock said that we are a species with amnesia. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we came from. And if you don't know those two things, you really don't know where you're going. We're at the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in New York City, and it's a Civil War monument, and across the top you'd have to walk 360 degrees around it to be able to read it, but it says, "Memory of the soldiers and sailors who died." I feel very attached to this place. I feel like I am the guardian, and I have had to defend it. I had to defend it against people who came to desecrate it and defile it.
Hello there, this is Tiffany Ray, and I'm here today with Robert Morningstar. We did some videos before when we were both at the, that was the Breakthrough Energy Conference?
No, it was the Secret Space Program and the Breakaway Civilization.
Okay, sorry.
The breakthrough on the energy was the following year.
Okay, so yeah, so many
7 years ago.
secret names, yeah, 7 years ago. And
San Francisco.
No, that wasn't in
San Mateo.
San Mateo, yeah.
It's all San Francisco.
Right. So those were some wonderful videos, and I really enjoyed talking to you. That was wonderful. So now we're in New York City, and I was thinking how there's life before, and now that I've heard that it will forever be known as life before the pandemic and life after the pandemic. So
Well,
I wanted to get your
I think that's malarkey.
really
We don't talk about life before 9/11 and life after 9/11.
good
We
point.
just roll with it.
Exactly, I like that.
New York is coming back to old normal.
Good,
You know?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
all a big scam that they pulled on us, and people are waking up. Dr. Fakey is on his way out.
Okay, so I have some questions I wanted to pick your brain on because I came out to speak with Robert. It's all about UFO disclosure now. I think UFO disclosure is a personal thing for each person. I think it's based on your own consciousness, what you're going to experience, if you will experience anything. And that's my take on it.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's a personal, it has to do with free will, and you can never force an experience on another person, so it's whatever people want to believe, and then that's experiences they'll have. So, so I wanted to ask you what made you get into the whole UFO thing. When did it start?
It's been part of my life all my life.
Since you were a little kid?
Mm-hmm. I realized that my first childhood trauma was the result of an extraterrestrial intrusion. I was
First childhood
trauma. I was a perfectly happy, loving child, and secure in all the world until I was 3 years old, and I was sitting on a swing in front of my grandfather's porch, looking into a room that was dark, with a doorway that was open that had an illumination coming through it. And I saw a dark form walk, blacker than the darkness, walked across, stopped in the doorway, silhouetted, turned its head and stared at me, and it wasn't him.
I mean, this is not the first time I've heard this story. I've heard this story before
Daryl,
about the beings darker than dark, blacker than black.
Well, he stopped, he turned and looked at me, and he scared the hell out of me. I just started screaming, and then he skulked is a better word.
Yeah, that's
walked
not
back
the first
into
time.
the shadow, and he was darker than the shadow, or the darkness. And I screamed, as they say, bloody murder. And
At 3 years old?
3 years old. And my grandparents ran out. What's happening? I said, there's something in the room. And they went into the room, and there was nothing in the room. But my baby brain said, there was something in the room. He must have gone down through the floorboards.
Wow.
That was an insight. And I've heard a similar story from our friend in Texas, the alien hunter, Daryl Sims.
Who's that?
Daryl Sims, he's a very well-known UFO investigator, and I think one of the foremost experts on alien intrusion, alien abduction. He was about my age, 3 or 4 years old, when an ET walked into his room or appeared in his room, a very white figure, and started to approach him, and he backed off on the bed. And there was space between the bed and the wall. He backed up to the wall, and then as he got closer, he dropped through the space and under the bed. And then he says that the ET looked under the bed and said, "Come out, little boy. I'm only a clown. He transmogrified into a clown, but Daryl was a very smart baby.
What a horrifying
Yeah,
clown.
and he said, "I know you're not a clown. I'm not coming out." That was his experience. So I think that's a core experience. But then when I was about 8 years old, we were watching television. CBS News spotlighted 1956 event of 2 UFOs were pacing an airliner in the South. I think it was American Airlines. It's a pretty famous case. And the airline pilots reported it. So CBS News did a graphic. They put a picture of a DC-3 airliner, a propeller plane, and the UFOs flashing on the right and left side of the cockpit. And my father jumped out of his chair. He said, "What? Robert, I saw those things. I saw those things in 1948. And he said, I didn't even have a word to express what it was. He was out at sea. He was a merchant marine sailor.
From New York?
He was from Central America. That's my stepfather. And he put out his arm and he said, "Look at my arms." And he showed me the hairs on his arms were standing up on end. He said, "Look."
Look, I still look. My arm, my hair on my arm is still standing up. It was one of the strangest
I hear that
experiences that he had ever had.
when the hair stands up on your arms, it's a signal that that's the truth.
Well, they have electronic fields around them. That's why I caution people: don't go chasing UFOs. And if a UFO lands, don't approach it. These are toxic. They're dangerous. You know that the space shuttle, when it came down from outer space, it couldn't be approached for an hour by ground crew because it was radiating so much heat. Imagine something coming down at 10,000 miles an hour. Similar things have happened. People have been burned by close approach to UFOs, emanations, exuding toxic gases, and they are not all benevolent. You shouldn't stare at UFOs for long periods of time because the actinic rays that they radiate when they're in a high energy state, they radiate something called actinic rays, and they can actually cause blisters on your cornea. So one must be cautious. And I'll tell you one more thing. I have a friend who was a doctor for the CIA, and he did studies of people who had had close encounters with UFOs, and he did brain studies and x-rays, and he found that several of them had lesions. They were exposed to UFO radiation and developed tumors, and subsequently some of them died within 3 months. So they're the same. Flying saucers, serious business, and you should take it that way.
I have
May I say one more thing about the disclosure?
Of course.
I am very cautious about this disclosure. This is the same government that still tells you that Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy with a single bolt-action rifle. It's the same one that tells us that the 9/11 was conducted by 9/11 attacks were 19 Arab hijackers, and that the Gulf of Tonkin attacks in Vietnam were real. All these were justifications for radical policies that the government instituted. So I would say I'm very cautious of anything the government says, especially one that has enforced denial, debunked witnesses for 80 years. All of a sudden it's turning around and saying, oh yeah, gee, UFOs are real. And you can believe in UFOs as long as you believe in UFOs the way we tell you to believe in UFOs. So I am skeptical, and it is a very well-known account that Werner von Braun warned Dr. Carol Rosen that this was one of the plans of the deep state to continue the enforcement of the national security state and the reduction of constitutional rights in the name of national security. And I think this may be the latest ploy.
Well, that's the general consensus of many people. Many people say that. So how would a person know what sort of maybe the real thing, benevolent, versus something that's just put out in the media for some sort of purpose, some sort of leveraging something?
Well, I think that the account that I gave you earlier, the closest one, was benevolent.
Right.
They show themselves to let you know that they're real.
Right.
But they don't intrude. But there are the intruders, so we have to understand that it's not one race of extraterrestrials, or just two.
Yeah, I've heard that
there are many.
Right. But how come we only talk about the Greys, the Nordic Whites, the reptilians? Those are like the Arcturians.
They're the best known, and because they are the most intrusive.
The Lyra, the
yes,
lions.
I've heard of
Yeah. So those are really the only ones we really sort of talk about.
Well, the Russians say that there are at least 57 kinds of them, and they've got a whole book. Look up the Book of Aliens from Russia. So most of them are reclusive. They are doing their thing, their operations, their studies, their experiments on their own. They stay out of people's lives for the most part. But there are the intruders. And that's where we have the Zeta reticulans, the short and the tall gray. the reptilians, the tall whites are coming into popular
Can I tell you about
awareness.
my experience that I had?
Sure.
I was living in Los Angeles. It was a very strong planetary alignment. I just heard about it, didn't think anything of it. August 19th of 1997, Neptune and Uranus conjunctions, kind of strong alignment. And that night, I was living in Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles, where they say there's,
Yeah, it's an infamous place.
yeah, on Wonderland Avenue, I lived for a little bit, where they say there's actually a base there on top of that mountain. And something came up, a month before that, I had had a dream where I was living in this house with a big porch around it, which was that house. I had moved in there yet. And a ship came, and these really tall white beings, light skin, almost blue skin, long white hair, very tall, thin, came to me, and they said, Avriel wants to know if you'll help on the planet. The name like April, but Avriel.
Mm-hmm.
And then a month later, I moved into the place, and then that night, something came and set upon the house, and I looked up, and it was had a cloaking device, so it just looked like a mirror with white lights down the side and a mist, and I was hearing in my head like some kind of communication, I think, but I was really scared. I was really terrified. I didn't want to go outside. I felt like it wanted me to come outside, but I was too scared to go outside. I felt like I saw pink light, laser beam come down and outside into the backyard, and then it was gone after a bit, and then some helicopters came. I heard helicopters hovering, chasing something.
Yes.
And then it was all over. I forgot about it, went to see a really well-known psychic in Malibu there. Who worked with Penny Besant, this woman named Sally Vickers, lived on the side of the mountain there. And the first thing she said was, you just had your 5th visitation.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, when was my first?
Yes. Well, Avriel is an angelic name, you know, like Gabriel, Mikael. This is really how you say their names. And so they pass themselves off as angels, or want to.
She said Avriel was like a Christ consciousness in their system. That was the name of their sort of Christ consciousness energy was Avriel, something like that.
Yeah. Well, the Christ consciousness is dormant in everyone. So is the satanic. You know, this is the marvelous thing about being a human being, that we encapsulate both. The soul encapsulates both. And we are given free will to express one or the other, or neither. And so
That's what
the
I've heard.
one is Eros and Thanatos is what the Greeks called it, you know, the life or love instinct and the death instinct. And unfortunately, the negative has taken over a lot of people. People have been forced to live in fear and anger. And it's a conscious effort on the part of, I'll just say it, the New World Order. The New World Order wants to cow people into submission. You look around here, some people are still wearing masks. It's a beautiful summer day.
Barely any, but almost
Yes,
no people are wearing masks
very
now,
few.
I have to say,
New
which is
York.
wonderful to see.
New York is shunning the mask.
Yeah.
And I'm
Only a
shunning the
couple people.
vaccine. It's very dangerous. It's not a vaccine, first of all. It's genetic engineering modification technology. Well, you know, last year that nobody died from the flu
I actually
because
had
they
s-
conflated. They
Right.
conflated the statistics. That every death was labeled COVID-19.
I know that me and everybody I know had a 2-week horrific flu the winter of 2019 in New York. Everybody had it.
Yep.
And it was horrific. I mean, I was like, this thing could kill people. But it was like 2 weeks, worst flu I've ever had, one of them. But it made the rounds a couple months before, you know, it hit everything else. But okay, I've got another question. I wanted to ask you, you know, I recently saw an expose on the Ark of the Covenant. Apparently it was booby trapped, so he had to do certain things when he entered into there, or he would have been killed. I wanted to ask your opinion about something like that because the floor looked like a mirror. And I've heard from the Pleiadians, they say that it's ET booby trap technology, so they know who's going in there. And I think the floor was really recording whoever was there, so they'll know who it is. And I also heard that it took a specific frequency of a being. Only a certain DNA frequency of a person could even enter. And he knew what to do, so he didn't die. And he ducked at a certain time when something came out, and he was able, there was like an invisible wall that he went under. And it was some of the most fascinating footage I've ever seen. I wanted to get and I felt like after I watched that, something happened, and looking at the Ark of the Covenant, something in my own life happened just from gazing upon it and seeing this technology or whatever this thing was about the heart and abundance, and what the abundance of creation, and how there was something so powerful about even just watching that and seeing it.
Well, I'm
And it
going to tell
affected
you
my
something
life.
I discovered many years ago. These devices, electromagnetic devices, capture energy. There was a PBS special 20 years or more ago called Healing and the Mind. And in the first episode, I think it was Bill Moyers, was exploring Chinese healing techniques and highlighting Tai Chi and acupuncture and Qigong. And they had a Qigong master who was working on a patient in China. And first they gave you a side view, a horizontal view. The Tai Chi master was moving his hands over the person's body like this, back and forth, making waves. But then they switched the camera angle to a long shot between the person's legs, shooting up along the body. And the Tai Chi master's hands were going this way toward the camera. And all of a sudden, he did his hands like this over the person, but then he went. And the energy came right out of the screen and hit me. And I realized that these gadgets have the capacity to transfer energy, both positive and negative energy.
Interesting.
And either help to heal or contaminate people with toxic energies. As a matter of fact, in 1999, Li Hongzhi, who is the head of the Falun Gong meditation system, I don't call it a cult, you know, that's a derogatory term. It's a school of meditation that has certain requirements in morality and ethics and peacefulness. And it burgeoned in China, and 100 million people were practicing it every day in circles in China in the late 1990s. And the Chinese government fears that kind of union, that kind of love, dare I say? And they started persecuting the Falun Gong movement, and they still do. And it's a heinous thing that they're doing because they are murdering Falun Gong people in order to steal their organs. Be that as it may, Li Hongzhi fled to the United States, and he lives here in New York, as a matter of fact, in Queens, as I know. And he was interviewed by Time magazine about the political aspects of Falun Gong and the teaching. But then at the end, they asked him a question. They said, "Why is there so much chaos in the world?" And he said, "The reason there's so much chaos in the world is that there are evil extraterrestrials here that have been here for over 100 years, and they're trying to change human nature using electrical devices." And he sounded quite insane. He sounded quite mad. In 1999, it sounded to me like Time magazine was trying to discredit him. At the same time they built him up, they wanted to portray him as a kind of fanatic, tinfoil hat, as they say. But you know, 1999, 2021, that's 22 years. And it seems to me that everything that he said has come true. These devices, the iPhones and other devices, are feeding information and disinformation into your mind. They actually are stealing your awareness. They're stealing your consciousness. Right now, we're hijacking your consciousness for a benevolent reason. we want to educate you about this. I do. But those gizmos and the Pokemon, all of those games, they are hijacking your consciousness and focusing you on things that are not beneficial and not geared to your survival, your individuality, or your free will. So again, just as I say, one must be cautious in even viewing UFOs or chasing UFOs. You have to watch the content of what you allow into your mind. Timothy Leary said something to me very, very interesting back in 1998 or so, earlier, in the mid-90s. I went to see a lecture, and he said to us, learn to operate your brain, because if you don't, someone else will.
Exactly. I have another question. I wanted to ask you, did you see it's a video I just saw of the benevolent ET, the woman that says she's the reincarnated Ray from the Roswell crash.
No, I haven't seen that.
Senny is her name.
No, I haven't seen
You haven't
that.
seen that? Okay,
No,
I'm going to
but
send that to you.
I have read I recommend a book by Lawrence Spencer. It's called Alien Interview, the story of Matilda McElroy. And she was the secretary to the base commander at Roswell. She was psychic, telepathic. She could hear the aliens' thoughts. And I've read hundreds of books on UFOs, but rarely have I been moved to change on my awareness by any book as much as Alien Interview. And I recommend that to people. Also, I'd like to get back to the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, the
In
Ark
the
of
Bible, the Ark of the Covenant killed people. Even people who thought they were doing benevolent things. Like the Ark of the Covenant was going to fall off the device. They had to carry it on poles, and it was tipped over, and it was going to fall over. And one man tried to stop it from falling over. He touched it. He was electrocuted. But an interesting experiment.
He was electrocuted?
He was electrocuted.
What I noticed on top of it was everything is melted, like the gold and the jewels, it's melted into it. So there's some kind of extraordinary energy within it. So
the high priests had to wear vestments, and one of the vestments, there was Urim and Thummim, and one of the vestments was composed of 12 precious and semi-precious jewels that were in a square. Yeah, four by 3.
So
and these jewels were protecting from the radiation. But in the mid-1960s, at the University of Michigan, some people in the engineering department decided to build a facsimile of the Ark of the Covenant, made out of pure gold. They took all of the measurements that are given in the Bible, and they constructed a facsimile of the Ark of the Covenant. And this object became so charged with electricity that it became dangerous, and they actually had to dismantle it and discharge it.
Well, but what do you think about, because I know in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, when the corrupt people got it, and they thought, oh, we've really scored now, we've got it, and they open it up, you know,
Right,
full of greed, and Harrison Ford, as they're tied up, he was like, oh, shut your eyes, don't look at it.
That's basically what I'm telling you.
Right, so, but to me, is it about greed versus, you know, the frequency of greed and corruption destroys versus, you know,
Intention.
a loving heart.
Intention.
They were safe because, so if someone were to approach it, say someone with greed versus another person of just, you know, putting it in its proper place to transfer it somewhere else or get it to a safe place or something like that, the intentions behind it would keep a person safe versus destroying them.
I think that ETs and these objects
You think they
are
could,
they mirror. They
you-
mirror.
Do you think they could be operating it?
ETs could be operating, but I'm just saying this, that they tend to mirror what your emotions are. If an ET
It just gives you
confronts
back what you're putting. What
exactly,
you're putting
if
out.
you are aggressive, if you're hostile,
Okay, then
they
it just,
will give that right back to you.
Okay.
If you are calm, measured,
From your heart, you'll get that back.
yes.
Okay.
Now the devices, I believe, do the same thing. That they will
Well-
mirror your intention.
Okay, well that's why I believe everything that's happening now, everything's been so speeded up so no one can escape their own resonant vibration, what they're doing, because it's just being given back to them. No matter if it's ET, another person, an entity, attachment, something like that.
Well,
So,
let me tell you a story, an actual story, one of the more hair-raising experiences of my life. In 1977, I'd been doing Tai Chi for several years, and a friend of mine was very skeptical, and he thought, Robert, that could be Satan trying to trick you. And I was taken aback. And Tai Chi means supreme ultimate. It actually means God in Taoism. It's another term for the Godhead. And I spoke to Tai Chi and I said, I want to see who you are. I just say what you are. Because I'm going to dedicate my life to this. I want to know who you are. And I'm not going to deal with you if you are Satan or evil or satanic. And I had the most remarkable experience. In the middle of the night, I had an experience where I was confronted with a being that was sitting in a chair. And I knew that this was a dead body. And I was very detached from it because since my initiation into Tai Chi and having seen spirit, being touched by a ghost, I know that we are immortal. So I'm not taken aback by death or by a dead body. So I was looking at it very detached. And all of a sudden it became animate. And it looked at me very menacingly. And it started to come toward me and it was telling me, I'm going to take your soul. I'm going to take your soul. And my reaction was to clench my fist and get ready to fight it. And this voice said to me, no, Robert, you can't fight that. I agree with that part. This thing is not alive. It's undead. It's not alive. You cannot kill an undead thing. You can't fight it this way. And I realized, that's right. So what I did, I changed my fist into a finger, pointing, and I said, I love you. I love you because God created you. And if He created you, there has to be a good reason. When I said those words, there was a sound of a crack in my solar plexus, my heart chakra, cracking. And out of it came a wave of heat that propagated out like this. And it created a distortion in the atmosphere like a mirage does in the desert. And as this demon, that's what he was reaching to take my soul like this, when this wave of love touched, or he entered it, it burned him. He screamed in pain and he disappeared. Now, I was in shock. I was trembling.
hold on a minute. Okay, now back up here.
Yeah.
You were sleeping?
I was asleep, and in the middle of the night.
Where were you sleeping?
In my own bed.
Here, in New York City.
Right there in my apartment.
Okay. In the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right after I
1977.
After I uttered that challenge to God.
When you wanted to see who Tai Chi is,
Yeah.
the beingness of Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, your heart field is a stream all around you of another. It's dimensional. It's interdimensional. So if you can keep coming back to your heart, then like what just happened, you burned it. So you don't need to fear. This is all. Every time I start getting, it's just ahead of myself. I just stop and I say, okay, I'm here right now. I'm in this moment now. Forget about running on the gerbil wheel that used to be. That's no more, because that energy was in the future. It wasn't even in this moment. So this whole thing that happened Abraham Hicks said that we all orchestrated it collectively because we couldn't go on the way we were living. Running as fast as we couldn't run any faster. And so we all created this world, global stop, which is, it's just mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing that the collective consciousness created what happened. That's, to me, is what I believe happened.
I like to
We all
explain to
created.
people that Christ is not a last name. Jesus Christ wasn't his last name. Christ is a title. And Jesus was the Christ. He was the first Christ. And Christification is the process of really fully becoming a human being, achieving the fullness of humanity, which is why I object to this concept of transhumanism. Why should we try to transcend our true nature? What are we to become? Are we to become machines? Man and machine, human or woman and machine? I don't think that's our purpose, our destiny. And so Christ is a title or a state that comes upon a person when they arrive at a certain state of being. And I would caution people who like to use Christ as a cudgel. That's what I call Bible thumpers. If you read the Gospel according to St. John, it says that he gave the power to those who believe in his name of becoming sons of God. So he was the first son of God. Christ is the first son, not the only son.
I have a question on that because I've been watching a series about what happened to the Turkmen a long time ago, and the different tribes and the Muslims, and how I guess the church, the Templars, tried to pit them all against each other, and basically, the Pope was doing the same crap back then that he's been doing now, the same game, same thing, over and over again. It appears to me, in the name of Jesus, which makes me so angry to use in the name of Jesus to exert so much control, and then to go in and subvert the Muslim tribes, and watching this series about what happened to the Turk people. It's so beautiful. Their morals were just so high, and their hearts and their religion was so beautiful. And I've never known much about the Muslim religion, but this whole divisiveness, that's been used through the centuries, it's got to end.
All the world's great religions have been hijacked by powerful tyrants. Will always use religion in order to seduce the populace. I recommend a book called Red Shambhala by Alexander Nemensky. So, the legend of Shambhala said that it was a great city in the far north, and that from this great city in the far north, a philosophy of universal brotherhood and peace would emanate, and that it would overrun the world. So the communists in Moscow said, and they were in league with the Tibetans, there were many communist Tibetan lamas, they said, let's go in there, and we're going to tell them that the communist revolution in Moscow is Shambhala, and we're going to turn them into communists because we'll convince them that this great northern city is preaching universal brotherhood and equality, and that's how Central Asia and ultimately the Far East and China was seduced, by hijacking their religious beliefs, their legends, their mythology, and their prophecies. This has already happened here in the West. The New World Order has hijacked every religion's end-time scenario and is trying to orchestrate that through a system of staged events and what I call global theatrics. You've heard about global theater. Well, this is what we're talking about. This pandemic is part of the plot. It's been fake. It's been false. Mark Twain said there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I think that the last year has proven that Mark Twain was a much wiser man and perhaps a prophet in our time. because all of the statistics that they've fed to us to create the fear, the panic, the paranoia have crashed. COVID-19 is a temporary illness that 99.7% of the people who get it contracted survive. Masks do not work. The difference between masked and unmasked in avoiding the contagion is 0.003%. Talk about global warming. Everybody's going crazy about CO2. Carbon is good for life. Carbon dioxide is good for life. There has never been a greater burgeoning of life on this planet than happened during the Carboniferous era. And I was taken to task by a very good friend of mine named Alan, who was exposing this fraud, the global warming fraud. And he said, Robert, do you know how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere? I said, not really. And he said, well, if you were to guess, what would your guess be? And I said, from all this stuff, the Greta Thunberg and all of that. He said, just guess. Off the top of my head, I said, what, 16%? He said, wrong. It's almost immeasurable. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 417 parts per million. And when you calculate that, it's 0.000417 of 1%. It's a total fraud.
Okay, on that, I've heard that we're moving northerly, and that the North Star, that's the only star that's it's always set in the
Polaris.
same place. Right. So that we're
Over
moving
there right now.
that we're moving northerly through creation, and that we're going through a part of creation that we've never been through, and that we're moving through as in a spiral, and that we're moving in a spiral direction, and that the Earth, that we've shifted a little bit to the north, that our magnetic field shifted a little bit to the north. And I had a dream 2 years ago where I saw a great wave of light come upon the Earth. It was green light, and it swept across all the Earth. And so what I've heard is that we're going through like a photon light belt.
I've read about that too. When 2012 happened, I've heard that the 2012 the Earth and the Sun, actually the Sun is traveling. We are all spacemen. We are all spacemen and spacewomen. We are exploring new regions of outer space, and the Earth is our spaceship. But
Yes,
when
we're on
2012 happened, we
spaceship
passed
Earth.
through the galactic center. We're sinking through it, and I have read that we are entering new regions of outer space that contain different radiations and different clouds of gas, starting to look like a tall light.
You turned into a Nordic, right on camera. I was hoping for that. I was hoping for a little paranormal.
Yeah. I believe that the human race hopscotched and had to come to Earth
From Mars.
From Mars.
I've heard that
The human
before.
race
That
evolved
we-
originally on Mars, but the Martian cataclysm forced an exodus.
I've heard that.
If you see the movie Mission to Mars, they depict that at the end.
Why do you think Trump talks about going to Mars?
Going home, perhaps, to find out our roots. One of the things I mentioned, Graham Hancock. He's another man who tracked the Ark of the Covenant. He went to Ethiopia. He followed all of the references, biblical references, historic references, and he claimed to have found it in Ethiopia. And he says that humanity is a species with amnesia. We don't know where we came from. We don't know where we are. We don't know who we are. And if we don't know those things, we don't know where we're going.
So I guess that's why everyone calls it the Great Awakening, because everyone is waking up to
Remembering is what it is.
remembering who we are. Do you believe, and this is what I've heard, that time is not in a line, that it's simultaneous.
Yes.
So we're actually,
There's a universal moment.
it's a universal moment. So we're actually, so maybe when you sleep, that it's not really a dream, but you're actually seeing yourself in other lifetimes.
Well,
or-
a lot of my dreams are prophetic. They show me events of the coming day, or days, or weeks, or years. And so the soul is not bound by space-time. And we have spiritual abilities that make it possible for the soul to migrate. It can leave the body and travel in space-time, back in time, forward in time, and sideways in time. Sideways in time is the present. So I can be sleeping here in New York City, and if somebody I love, my brother or something, or someone is going through some crisis, I'll see it, I'll experience it, and my energy can go out. This has happened many times in my life where people have been in crisis and they said that they thought of me and that they felt information, let's just call it that, help came from me to them. And so those messages are being beamed to all of us by a benevolent deity, a God who loves us.
So listening to Cryon.
Yes, I've read some of that.
And Cryon says that it's almost like we're having a direct interface now with the mind of God. And so that veil is being removed. And so I truly feel that there's almost like okay, today this other thing didn't happen, this thing canceled because this other thing, you need to do this. And it's almost like you're given your sort of marching orders from a higher, higher consciousness now. So that there's a connection now that's grown even stronger that you can't deny, that's in control of everything. And I think that veil is pretty much gone.
I would agree with it. I think that what's happening is we're remembering who we are. Graham Hancock said we're a species with amnesia, and amnesia comes out of amnesia sometimes.
That we're part of this oneness.
Let me just say this. There are various kinds of memory, right? We have a personal memory of our own lives, but we are composed of atoms that came out of the sun. Every molecule in our bodies is composed of atoms that came out of the sun.
Out of the sun?
Yes. And
that's why we respond to light.
We are beings of light. However, I believe that there's something that I would call atomic memory or nuclear memory. And that is something that happened to me in 1974. I remembered the creation. I saw the creation. It was there at the beginning of time. I saw the birth of life. And that came when, a lot of people don't know it, the Hindus know it. They call it the Night of Brahman. The Hindus believe that God sleeps for a very long time, and it goes into oblivion. And then when he wakes up, God wakes up, and when he wakes up, creation unfolds.
Do you think this is what's happening now? Is it somebody woke up?
I certainly woke up in
somebody
1974.
Woke up and said, you know what? I'm awake. And you know what?
I'm not woke. I am awake.
I am awake, and here you go. This is what's going on.
Well, basically, let me say this. God is the stuff of consciousness. God, you might say, a spark of God, as I experienced it first, as I said, it was a mystical event, a mystical experience I had. When God awoke, there was nothing. There was nothing to know, there was nothing to remember, and there was only one realization. And the first words that came to God's mind was, I am here. And when he stated, I am here, it created a polarity between I am here and I am that. If it's not here, it's there. So this created a polarity, and in this polarity, a new space was created, and the space of creation. And in that space, light was born. And when light was born, the cosmic Christ, the darkness was manifest. And the darkness was not pleased because the darkness loved its darkness and wanted to suffocate the light. And that darkness was Lucifer. And the fall occurred because Lucifer tried to kill God. He wanted to kill God and make everything go back into blackness, into oblivion. And that's when he fell, and that's when his nature changed from Lucifer to Satan.
When I went to, I started traveling around the world, went to Bali. When I went there, I started having these visions when I was sleeping of a great eye looking at me, like the one that looks like the cosmic eye of the stars. And it was looking at me. And
well, you know, that's the term. There's the I and thou. I and thou. The I was looking at you, so the I was I, and you were thou. But my experience was, I was the I. When the awakening occurred,
it's to become the I.
I was the I. But this I could see in 360 degrees around, up and down. Saw everything simultaneously. Like an eye here, an eye here, everywhere. And then when I looked down, I saw the abyss. And I was being allowed to remain Robert and aware of myself as this little individual drop of ego. And that's what I was told. You're going to be the witness. I was dropped into the ocean of consciousness and allowed to know that I was still an individual drop in the ocean. But when I was in the ocean, I could fathom it's the abyss. I looked down and it was the abyss. And there was a purple light. The pleroma was all around. And where the pleroma touched, it generated life. And where the pleroma did not touch, there was the void, there was darkness, there was no life. And this began to expand. And as it expanded, it encountered another spot. I am that. It found the soul, the universal soul. And when God had encountered the universal soul, love was born. And love infused life into the soul. And the spirit went into the soul. And the soul began to aggregate a body around it. The universe is the body of God. And we are remembering who we are. So what happened to me is I was able to tap into the archives. They call it the Akashic Record, but I call it nuclear memory. Every atom in our body contains information, and the aggregate forms us. So when our consciousness can go into the center and find the center, you will remember where you came from. We were all there. We were all there in one point at the beginning of time. We have all been expanding into our current forms after the Big Bang. And we're still expanding. The end is not near.
Do you think all the souls here now are here for this particular event?
Yes, we've chosen to be here. I know because, look, I'm 72 years old. I dedicated my life to psychology, and I explored parapsychology thoroughly. I was regressed to my own conception through hypnosis. I went through a session with a very, very skilled British hypnotist. I asked to be regressed back to my own conception. And what I remembered was being a sperm cell looking for the egg. And I remembered...
That's really remembering.
That's really remembering. And I knew that if I didn't find what I was looking for, I was going to perish. I was going to die. And I homed in on heat. If I swam too far to the right, it started to get cold, and I evaded the cold, and I went to the left, and it got cold. And so this was how I homed in. And finally, I hit this thing. I said, this is it. I've got to get inside. And well, I beat my head against it, and I broke through, and I slid in, and I remember sliding in, and it was like being in one of those big egg-shaped chairs that you used to see in the 1960s and 70s, at the roundness, and I rested, and when I rested, the length of my head and my tail rested and took the shape of the inside of this egg, and that became my spine, and my nerves started to branch out, And I remember this fiery energy, which started like a volcanic force at the tail and grew up through my spine and went up through the length of my spine and into my head. And that is what is called the Kundalini. So the Kundalini is the life force, and it first manifests itself in our own conception. But I had to struggle to get here. I wanted to
Wow.
live.
That's well, I mean, I've heard of people remembering like the agreements before they came in as well, things like that. But okay, well, I think that's going pretty far back. Well, let's end it on this for now.
Yes.
And we had talked about we're going to do a series of some Tai Chi with intentions
Yeah, I'm just going to
of
show you
making
some Qigong. I'm going to show you some Qigong.
Right, but you had mentioned about doing a series of, I guess, doing some Tai Chi with the intention of maybe seeing a ship or some
Yes,
ships coming or
yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
In the future. Coming
Well,
up the next few weeks.
Yes, actually, we were told, see, this disclosure is not the first attempt at disclosure. In 1998 to 2010, I was part of another U.S. Navy initiative. The Navy's been trying to tell the people the truth for a long time, and the deep state has been opposing it. But there was
So
an
the
initiative.
Navy is always trying to get info out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I keep hearing about guys from the Navy
Yeah,
trying to
it
get
is. It's
this
true.
out, that out,
Yeah.
that they're doing all this great
But,
work. Because the Navy is like a ship in the ocean or a ship in space.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, they were told in 2010 that the extraterrestrials want people to know, the benevolent extraterrestrials want people to know that they are here and that they have to intercede because so many things have been gone wrong through the greed of the New World Order, the loss of human freedom, the erosion of our constitutional rights, and that they come to help us fix it. And that if the governments of the world did not reveal the extraterrestrial presence to the world, that they would do it themselves. And they would do it by openly manifesting their presence in such a way that the people of the world would know that every government has been lying. And that's what we're coming up to now.
So you're saying that they've been given an ultimatum.
An ultimatum.
That it's time.
Yeah. And that initiative failed because the deep state is very strong, very powerful, and resistant because all of their power is based on fear and paranoia. And to relieve humanity of fear and paranoia removes that power from them. So yes, I am going to do a horizontal meditation to see if we can draw UFOs.
Well, I'll be here for that.
Okay, and
Let's do it.
you can be here. Maybe set up the camera so you can see my meditation. I'll do it for a few seconds.
Okay, are you going to show us the amazing abdominal?
Yes.
He's going to, okay, so.
I'm going to show you balance. People say, why do you do Tai Chi? Well, it teaches you centering and balance. And on these benches, about 10 years ago, I made a discovery about centering. It just came upon me. And it was a discovery. I was the most surprised person on the planet. And I have cultivated this meditation for a long time. And some of my students can do it. And I believe almost anyone can do it with proper training. I don't advise you to try it without consulting me.
Okay,
But
so we're
I
going
think
to.
it's a fun way to.
You're going to show us
Yes,
that
I'm
now?
going to show you that.
Okay, so let me just get ready here.
Okay. This meditation is called a balance on the bench.
Incredible.
I'd like to dedicate this interview to my late friend and colleague, Mark McCandlish, who was a great aerospace illustrator and a whistleblower on the secret space program and UFOs, who passed away an untimely death on April 13th, 2021. It's just a coincidence that I decided to wear a comfortable shirt here today, and I grabbed this one. And it says Westover. The Westover Country Club or Golf Club. And that's where Mark McCandlish was when he sighted his first UFO in 1966, and then dedicated his life to illustrating aerospace aircraft, spacecraft, and UFOs. So, rest in peace, Mark McCandlish.
I've reported this very same object back on August 1st in a different sighting. This time the vehicle appeared to be ejected from a boomerang craft and was not cloaked in a translucent field shaped like a tic-tac. I can see the craft clearly. It was full metallic gray, round edges like stone, and a rectangular shaped body that was larger in the front and slimmer toward the tail end. It had two larger, crab-like landing legs underneath toward the front. The boomerang craft was in a translucent cloaked field that flickered and caught my attention, first as I exited my vehicle at my job site. I initially just tried to ignore it and grab my coat out of the trunk. It was a cooler morning that day. I noticed the bright 6 lights above the hub building where we park our work trucks. I put my coat on and started reaching for my phone in my pocket. I noticed that the boomerang seemed to be facing west toward my position. Suddenly, the smaller craft appeared and was hovering slowly around the front top side as if it was ejected from the larger craft. I took a picture just then. My flash was on, this time no burst. It seemed to get the smaller craft's attention. The smaller craft started to slowly descend and hover. I started to feel extremely nervous and warm. My necklace, earrings, and hand rings started to pull away from my body with resistance. I blinked and braced myself. The boomerang craft was gone. The smaller craft flickering a field on, off, and on again, then shot straight up in the sky faster than the speed of light. I lost track of time for exactly 55 minutes. I still did not remember my morning safety meeting or lunch inspection from that morning after the incident. I just remember leaving the hub and starting the day route. Thank you for your time. James G.